Today we're going to be talking about classroom quality and poverty. My name's Taffeta Wood, and I have a background in education, as mentioned.
My name is Viviana Barnwell. I have a background in education too, and I'm the parent of a 9-year-old autistic boy. We're going to start with a disclaimer. All the information and ideas and conclusions that Taffeta and I will share with you today are only ours, and they don't represent LEND or any of its sponsors. Also, we are going to use the terms student with autism or autistic student interchangeably depending on the source. This is the overview of our presentation. We'll go over objectives, background, literature review, method, results, discussions and implications, and next steps. So the objective of our study was to examine the associations of poverty, quality, and implementation within the context of an implementation trial of CPRT, Classroom Pivotal Response Teaching. Why is it important to study these associations? First, because autistic children in schools with higher poverty tend to access classrooms of lower quality. Also, because for many of these students, because of their conditions, school may be their only intervention. And finally, because in order to promote equity, it is important to understand district-level poverty and implementation supports in predicting classroom quality and evidence-based intervention fidelity. These are some of the ideas that we found through our literature review. First, a critique to the wide use of the term disadvantaged learning. When we use this term, there are two stereotypic ideas that are really spread out. One has to do with the capability of the child, and the second one with the focus on family deficiencies. As a result, there are three adverse consequences. One, low expectations for what these students can accomplish in academic work. The second one has to do with failure to examine carefully what the schools do that may exacerbate or facilitate the solution of the learning problems. And the third one is the misdiagnosis of learning problems in students who are in poverty. Also, we found that, as many of us may know, when a student is in poverty, they tend to be they might lack a lot of opportunities, but also they are usually in low literacy skills, have less opportunities, they are not placed usually in the right setting, and they are placed in what is called the bottom track. As mentioned before too, when students are in poverty, they tend to have not enough resources or support systems. So many times school is their only intervention, hence the importance of quality. And finally, and this one we wanted to highlight it because it will relate to the results. Among the many issues involved with a student in poverty is the fact that many teachers don't receive support from their administrators. Again, we wanted to highlight that because that will come into play when we share the results. And now we're going to share the method.
So how did we go about examining these associations? We had access to data. Thank you very much, Avin, for the data. We had access to data from a larger study looking at CPRT. And within that data were teachers who rated their own quality. We had 181 of their self-reports of quality on the Autism Program Environment Rating Scale. And for the district level poverty, what was used was the free and reduced lunch percent. So how many students, what percent of your students at the district level are receiving free and reduced lunch? So that's an oft used marker of poverty. And then how did we go about seeing fidelity in these classrooms that were part of this larger study? So there was a coding scheme, and a team of coders looked at these videos and recorded what was happening. And they were, of course, doing that to fidelity, which means they were trained and checked to be rating things similarly enough that this was something that we could look at to try to deduce some sort of patterns from. So in this broader study that we're using data from, there were conditions. Everyone was receiving evidence-based intervention training, but the first condition just received that. So here's how you use classroom pivotal response teaching, which from now on, I'm just going to call CPRT. That was the first condition. In the second condition, we added something. So the leaders received an institute where they were getting professional development on how to implement in their school evidence-based interventions. So understanding what evidence is, how to use it, how to make decisions and enact evidence-based interventions in their school. And the third condition, instead of targeting leaders, there was a targeting of teachers with motivational interviewing around using CPRT. And in the fourth condition, both the leaders and the teachers were targeted. So those were the conditions. So now that we have that, what did we do to try to find these associations? So I know many people in the audience will be familiar with regressions, but basically these are some statistical analyses that look at relations between one variable and another, and is there some sort of association that makes you statistically convinced that this is probably not by chance? So we ran these regressions and examined main effects and interaction of free and reduced lunch, which we're thinking of as poverty, and the implementation condition. And then we're looking at how that affected quality and also fidelity. So what did we find? A little counterintuitive to the lit review, we did not see a significant association between that self-report of quality and poverty, nor were there any free and reduced lunch or poverty implementation condition interactions. And we'll talk about why that might be when we get to limitations. What was interesting to us is that there were significant interactions between free and reduced lunch and implementation condition in predicting the fidelity of using CPRT. So there was a negative association between free and reduced lunch and CPRT fidelity in the control condition. What we saw that was of interest to Viviana and myself, having our backgrounds in education, particularly Viviana can talk about this further, but this idea that associations, as you can see in the second point, were not significant in the leadership and teacher conditions. In the teacher condition, the poverty and fidelity were positively associated.
So there are two major implications. The first one has to do with the fact that, of course, poverty being such a complex issue, teachers working in districts with higher poverty had greater challenges when they had to reach fidelity, but they also were the ones that benefited the most from having the training. And the other important point that I alluded to when I presented the literature review was that when the administrators participated in the Leadership Institute, that helped mitigate the negative impact of district level poverty on fidelity. And that is something that I have experienced as an instructional coach. When a teacher gets training alone, it doesn't have the same impact as when a teacher, along with the administrator, get the same training.
Right, so no study is perfect, which everyone here knows. The teacher's report of quality may have been influenced by the fact that they were reporting on their own quality. It's not that we think they would lie, it's just sometimes hard to rate yourself. As well as when we looked at it statistically, there wasn't a lot of variation. And so as far as using it as a variable, it was hard to see any real meaningful relationship between just simply district level poverty and self-report of quality, because there wasn't enough variability in that variable. It's sort of like for those of you not familiar with statistics, it's like if you did a study on people's health and diet and there was only a little bit of variation in what people were eating, it's really hard to see anything meaningful there. We were not doing mediating and moderating quantitative analysis, just to clarify. And we're unaware and unable to account for other supports teachers may have received. So, were they getting additional supports that we didn't account for. Unfortunately, we don't know at this time. So what our next thing to do is to run similar analysis, but instead of just fidelity coding, we have quality coding of these classrooms. So we can really start to dig into this statistical relationships and really look at quality, because we're both very interested in that. So that is our next step, with the goal of, supporting leaders and teachers. I'd like to acknowledge grant funders, as well as teachers and students, and certainly all of those coders that were involved.
As a very interesting presentation. I guess one thing I just was a little bit unclear, maybe it's just for clarification. So the one association with your marker of poverty was actually in the opposite direction of what you expected. Did I interpret that correctly? So that it was the kind of better quality associated with higher rates of poverty, or did I just misinterpret that?
So it's not that you're misinterpreting, it's just that it was sort of a subtle and surprising thing that turned out to not be so surprising when we thought about it. So it's just that the boost that you got if you were in a poverty context, when you got either leadership or teacher and leadership support, the boost flipped what the impact of poverty was on your fidelity. So the way that I think about it, which is, it's one of those things where it's like, well, can we really claim that? But for now, the way that we're thinking about it is when you need something, it kind of gives you a bigger, faster boost than if you maybe have had other supports in the past or don't have the same blocks to implementation.
Good. Okay, that makes perfect sense. Thank you. That's helpful.
Sure. Thank you for asking that, because I bet other people were wondering and not asking.
I'm wondering, since both of you, I have a secret knowledge and know that both of you have been coding videos of teacher quality that's similar to that self-report, but a little more objective. I'm wondering if you think there's more variability in those data than in the teacher's report.
I would bet dollars to donuts that is true, partially because and I can let Viviana also jump in. Sorry, I'm highly caffeinated. There are often real lineups or divergences between what's reported and what's coded. So sometimes I'll get messages from people coding that's like, well, she said she does this, but in the video she does this. And that's maybe about 10% of the time. So I think, yes.
The UC Davis Mind Institute was founded in 1998 with a promise to reduce and prevent the disabilities that can be associated with autism and other neurodevelopmental conditions. Every day, our clinicians and researchers make progress on that promise. Our groundbreaking research on autism, Fragile X syndrome, chromosome 22q11.2 deletion syndrome, ADHD, and other conditions associated with disability are helping affected individuals achieve their fullest potential. Please visit our website or our social media platforms to find out more about current studies, upcoming events, and how you can help make a difference.